The transport shuttle descended through the purple clouds of Valorix Prime, and Dr. Sarah Chin pressed her face against the window like a child visiting a theme park for the first time. She had dreamed of this moment for 15 years, ever since Earth made first contact with the Korvathian Empire. "Try to contain your enthusiasm, Doctor," Ambassador Williams said from across the cabin, though his smile was kind. "The Korvathians prefer composure." Sarah nodded and sat back, smoothing her diplomatic uniform. She was here as Earth's representative xenoarchaeologist, chosen because she had published 3 papers on ancient Korvathian artifacts that had somehow drifted to Earth centuries ago. The Korvathians had been impressed. Impressed enough to invite humanity to witness something sacred. The capital city sprawled beneath them like a jewel box. Towers of crystal and metal reached toward the sky, some of them older than human civilization itself. Sarah's heart raced. Somewhere down there was the tomb of the first emperor, sealed for 50,000 years. The Korvathians who greeted them at the landing platform were tall and elegant, their skin shimmering with faint iridescent patterns. Lord Kavesh, their escort, bowed with perfect precision. His gesture was polite, but Sarah noticed how his eyes lingered on them with barely concealed amusement, like a professor watching kindergartners attempt calculus. "Welcome, friends from Earth," Kavesh said in perfect English. "We are honored that you journey so far to witness our sacred ceremony. Though, of course, you may find it difficult to fully appreciate its significance." Ambassador Williams smiled diplomatically. Sarah bit her tongue. They were taken to quarters in the palace complex, where everything was just slightly too large, too ornate, too ancient. Sarah touched a wall and learned it was 14,000 years old. On Earth, that wall would be in a museum. Here it was just architecture. That evening, Lord Kavesh explained the ceremony over dinner. "For 50 millennia, the tomb of the first emperor has stood sealed. Our greatest scholars believe it will open only when touched by one of pure royal descent. Every century, our High Empress herself attempts the opening. Every century, the tomb remains closed." "Has anyone else tried?" Sarah asked. Kavesh's expression suggested she had asked if anyone had tried breathing underwater. The royal bloodline of Korvath is verified through genetic markers that have been carefully preserved for thousands of generations. Only those with the highest concentration of royal DNA may even approach the tomb. Lesser beings? He paused delicately. "Well, they cause no reaction whatsoever." Sarah felt her face flush but said nothing. The next morning they were transported to the tomb site. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. The structure rose from the desert floor like a black mountain, its surface so smooth it seemed to swallow light. Thousands of Korvathians filled the plaza around it, all dressed in ceremonial robes of deep purple and silver. The human delegation was placed in an observation area at the edge of the plaza. Respectful distance, Kavesh had called it. Sarah thought it looked more like quarantine. The High Empress arrived in a hover platform that gleamed like captured starlight. She was ancient by human standards but moved with fluid grace. Her skin patterns glowed brighter than anyone else's, marking her supreme genetic heritage. The crowd fell silent as she approached the tomb. When the Empress placed her hand on the obsidian surface, symbols erupted across the structure in brilliant blue light. They swirled and danced, beautiful and complex. The crowd gasped in appreciation. But the doors did not open. The Empress stood there for several minutes, her hand pressed firmly against the stone. The symbols continued their dance, but nothing more happened. Finally she stepped back, her face showing no disappointment, only serene acceptance. One by one, other members of the royal family approached and tried. Each created a different pattern of light, some nearly as bright as the Empress herself. None succeeded. Sarah watched, fascinated by the patterns. She pulled out her tablet to record observations, when suddenly her nose began to tickle. The local pollen was murder on her sinuses. Sarah felt the tickle growing worse in her nose. She tried to breathe through her mouth, but the pollen-heavy air of Valorix Prime was relentless. Her eyes began to water. She fumbled in her pocket for a tissue, trying desperately to stay quiet during the solemn ceremony. Around her, the Korvathian nobles continued their attempts at the tomb. Each touch brought cascading lights but no success. The crowd watched in respectful silence as they had for centuries. This was tradition. This was sacred. The tickle became unbearable. Sarah turned away from the tomb, covering her nose with both hands. She tried to hold it in. She really did. But the sneeze exploded from her with the force of a small bomb. Achoo! The sound echoed across the silent plaza like a gunshot. Thousands of elegant Korvathian heads turned toward her. Sarah's face burned with embarrassment. Ambassador Williams looked like he wanted to sink into the ground. But the sneeze had thrown Sarah off balance. She stumbled forward, her arms windmilling, trying to catch herself. Her hands slapped against the tomb's surface to stop her fall. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the entire structure exploded with golden light. Not the gentle blue glow that the Korvathians created. This was different. This was like staring into a sun. The symbols on the tomb's surface blazed so brightly that people covered their eyes. New patterns appeared, ones that had never been seen before, racing across the obsidian in waves of pure radiance. Deep inside the structure, something groaned. Ancient mechanisms that had slept for 50,000 years rumbled to life. The ground trembled. Dust that had settled for millennia began to fall from the tomb's surface. Sarah yanked her hand back and stared at it like it had betrayed her. The golden light continued to pulse from where she had touched. The symbols grew brighter, faster, more intense. With a sound like thunder, the massive doors began to open. The plaza erupted in chaos. People screamed. Some ran forward. Others fell to their knees. The Korvathian guards rushed toward Sarah, their weapons drawn but their faces showing more confusion than aggression. They had no protocol for this. Nothing in 50,000 years of history had prepared them for this moment. Ambassador Williams grabbed Sarah's arm. "What did you do?" "I sneezed," Sarah said, her voice high and panicked. "I just sneezed." The High Empress stood frozen, staring at the opening doors. Her expression was unreadable. Centuries of composure had not prepared her for watching a clumsy human succeed where she and all her ancestors had failed. Lord Kavesh pushed through the crowd, his iridescent skin patterns flickering with agitation. "This is impossible. The genetic requirements, the royal bloodline." The doors continued their slow, majestic opening. Golden light spilled from within, and with it came a sound. Music, perhaps, or something like it. Ancient and beautiful and utterly alien. The High Empress finally moved. She walked toward Sarah with slow, deliberate steps. Her guards tensed, ready to protect her, but she waved them back. She stopped directly in front of the terrified human scientist. "You touched the tomb," the Empress said quietly. "I'm sorry," Sarah stammered. "I didn't mean to. I sneezed and I fell in." The tomb opened. "I don't understand how. I'm not royalty. I'm not even important on my own planet. I'm just a scientist who studies old things and has really bad allergies." The Empress stared at her for a long moment. Then she turned to look at the open tomb, at the golden light still pouring from within. "For 50,000 years, my family has tried to open this tomb. We believed it required the purest royal blood in the empire. We were wrong." She turned back to Sarah. "It seems the tomb was not waiting for us at all. It was waiting for you." From inside the tomb, something activated. A voice, ancient and powerful, began to speak in a language that made the Korvathians gasp in recognition. It was the voice of the first emperor himself, preserved across the millennia. And he was speaking a message meant for humanity. The High Empress made a decision that shocked everyone present. She gestured toward the open tomb and spoke directly to Sarah. "You opened it. You must enter first." Sarah's legs felt like water. "Your Majesty, I don't think that's appropriate. This is your sacred site. Your ancestor. I'm just..." "You are the one the tomb recognized." The Empress's voice was firm but not unkind. "Whatever waits inside has been waiting for you, not for me. Go." Ambassador Williams squeezed Sarah's shoulder. "We're right behind you." Sarah walked toward the golden light on trembling legs. The Korvathian guards formed a protective circle around her and the human delegation. Lord Kavesh followed, his face a mixture of curiosity and barely contained outrage. The inside of the tomb was nothing like Sarah expected. Instead of dust and decay, everything gleamed as if it had been sealed yesterday. The walls were covered in flowing script that seemed to move and shift. In the center of the chamber stood a tall pillar made of the same black stone as the exterior. As Sarah approached, the pillar began to glow. Suddenly, a figure appeared above it. A hologram, Sarah realized, but far more advanced than any technology Earth possessed. The figure was tall and unmistakably Korvathian, dressed in ancient robes that marked him as royalty. The first emperor. He began to speak, and translation devices around the room struggled to keep up with the archaic dialect. But certain phrases came through clearly, repeated over and over in the message. The children who left. When they return home. The blood of exiles. Forgiveness across the stars. The hologram gestured, and panels in the walls slid open. Inside were crystalline data cores, thousands of them, each pulsing with stored information. Screens materialized in the air, displaying genetic code that made the Korvathian scientists gasp. Lord Kavesh stepped forward, his eyes scanning the data rapidly. His skin patterns flickered from purple to pale white. This cannot be right. The genetic markers, they show. Show what? The High Empress demanded. Kavesh turned to face Sarah, and for the first time, his expression held no condescension. Only shock. 50,000 years ago there was a rebellion on Korvath. A group of common citizens demanded equal rights with the nobility. They were refused. The historical records say they were exiled to a distant colony world and never heard from again. Sarah felt her heart begin to pound. What are you saying? The DNA records in this tomb show the genetic signature of those exiles. Kavesh pointed at the screens floating around them. And those same markers are present in your species. In every human we have scanned since making contact. The chamber fell silent except for the gentle hum of ancient machinery. Humans are descended from Korvathians? Ambassador Williams said slowly. Not just any Korvathians, the Empress said, reading the data herself now. According to this, the exiles were selected from the purest bloodlines of the old nobility. They were considered dangerous precisely because they had royal blood but rejected the system. The hologram of the first emperor continued speaking, and now the translation came through more clearly. The AI had adapted to the ancient language. I could not stop the exile, the emperor's voice echoed through the chamber. The council feared change more than they valued justice. So I created this tomb. A message for the future. A gift for those who were wronged. The hologram turned, seeming to look directly at Sarah even though it was a recording made before her species had evolved language. This tomb will open only for the bloodline of the exiled. The children who were cast out. When you return home you will know the truth. You carry the blood of ancient Korvath. You are not outsiders. You are the lost princes and princesses of our people. You are royalty not because of titles, but because your ancestors chose freedom over power. Sarah sat down heavily on the floor, her mind reeling. Every human was descended from Korvathian nobility. The snobbishness of the Korvathian elite suddenly seemed absurdly ironic. Lord Kavesh stared at her, then at his empress, then back at Sarah. The humans are our royal cousins? The empress began to laugh. It started as a small sound but grew until it filled the ancient chamber with genuine mirth. The hologram of the first emperor continued playing, and Sarah watched as more secrets spilled out across 50,000 years. The crystalline data cores began projecting images into the air, showing scenes from ancient Korvath that no living being had witnessed. The emperor stood in a grand council chamber, arguing with other nobles. Even without sound, his anger was clear. He pointed at images of families being forced onto ships, their faces filled with fear and defiance. These were the exiles. Sarah saw Korvathian children crying, holding on to parents who tried to be brave. He fought for them, the empress whispered beside Sarah. My ancestor fought to stop the exile. The hologram showed the emperor alone in this very chamber, working in secret. He was building the tomb, programming its locks, filling it with treasures. Sarah watched him weep as he worked. The recording shifted, and the emperor spoke directly to the camera again. The translation was clearer now. I leave this message for the children of the rebellion. I leave you what the council refused to share. Knowledge, technology, truth. And most importantly, I leave you proof that you were never lesser. You were cast out because you were too strong, too brave, too unwilling to bow. Panels throughout the chamber opened, revealing wonders that made even the Korvathian scientists gasp. Medical devices that could cure diseases Earth still struggled with. Energy systems that produced power from nothing but space itself. Star charts showing hundreds of habitable worlds, marked and catalogued. This was meant to be our inheritance? Sarah asked quietly. An inheritance they earned, the empress corrected. Look at what the emperor left for them. For you. One screen showed detailed instructions for faster-than-light travel that was generations ahead of what either humans or Korvathians currently used. Another displayed agricultural techniques that could feed billions. There were blueprints for cities, formulas for medicine, and philosophical texts about governance and justice. But the most important message was still playing. The first emperor's hologram grew larger, more intense. To my children of the stars, I tell you this truth. Royalty is not in blood. It is not in titles or palaces or the ability to trace your family back through time. True royalty is in the courage to stand against injustice. It is in the strength to survive when the universe tries to break you. It is in building something beautiful from nothing. Sarah felt tears on her cheeks. Around her, even the proud Korvathian nobles were silent. You were sent to a primitive world with minimal supplies, the Emperor continued. You had every reason to fail, to die, to be forgotten. But I knew you would survive. I knew you would thrive. Because you carried something more precious than noble blood. You carried an unbreakable spirit. The hologram showed images that must have been predictions or hopes. Primitive humans learning to make fire. Building the first cities. Creating art and music. Reaching for the stars with wooden ships and crude sails. Then metal ships. Then rockets. And when you return home, the Emperor said, his voice thick with emotion, when you finally come back to Corvith, you will open this tomb. Not because of your genetics, though those remain pure, but because you earned it. You survived. You grew. You became something magnificent. Lord Kavesh was staring at the displays showing human history. They did it alone, he said softly. No help. No guidance. They went from stone tools to starships in less time than we took to develop written language. The Empress turned to Sarah. Your species accomplished in 50,000 years what took us 200,000. You did it on a world with harsher conditions than Corvith. You did it without the knowledge we took for granted. She paused. The Emperor was right. You earned this inheritance. The hologram began to fade, but the Emperor's final words echoed through the chamber. Welcome home, children of the rebellion. Welcome home, true royalty of Corvith. The universe awaits your return. Show them what exile made you. Show them what freedom creates. Show them that the greatest noble blood is the blood of those who refuse to kneel. The golden light dimmed, leaving them in the quiet chamber surrounded by gifts from an ancient ancestor none of them had ever known. The news spread across Valerix Prime like wildfire. Within hours, every Corvathian in the Empire knew that humans were their long-lost cousins. The reaction was explosive and divided. Some Corvathians celebrated in the streets, calling it a miracle of reunion. Others locked themselves in their estates, furious that commoners from a backward planet were suddenly considered their equals. The noble houses split into factions arguing over what this meant for their carefully maintained social order. Sarah sat in the palace garden 3 days after the tomb opened, exhausted from endless meetings and interviews. Ambassador Williams had been in negotiations with the Corvathian Council for 16 hours straight. The fate of 2 species hung in the balance. The High Empress found Sarah there, sitting by a fountain that was older than human civilization. The Empress sat beside her without ceremony, which would have scandalized her attendants if they had seen. You look tired, the Empress said. I sneezed, Sarah said with a weak laugh. I just sneezed. Now half your planet wants to throw me a parade and the other half wants to throw me into space. What do you think we should do? The Empress asked. Sarah looked at her in surprise. You're asking me? The tomb opened for you. Perhaps you have wisdom I lack. The Empress smiled slightly. Though I suspect you will say something very human and practical. Sarah thought for a long moment, watching the alien water fountain create patterns that Earth physics would never allow. Share it, she finally said. Everything in the tomb. Share it equally between our peoples. The technology would make Earth a superpower overnight. And keeping it would make you look like the same nobles who exiled our ancestors. Sarah turned to face the Empress directly. Your ancestor built that tomb as an apology. As a gift. But gifts only mean something if you actually give them. The Empress was quiet for a long time. Then she stood and offered her hand to Sarah. Come with me. We have an announcement to make. They walked to the Grand Council chamber where Corvathian nobles argued furiously with human diplomats. The room fell silent when the Empress entered. I have made my decision, the Empress announced. The technology in the tomb will be shared freely between Corvith and Earth. Additionally, I am abolishing the genetic verification of noble blood. 50,000 years of genetic tracking ends today. The chamber erupted in shouts. Lord Kavesh stood, his face pale. Your Majesty, you cannot simply end thousands of years of tradition. I can and I will, the Empress said firmly. The first Emperor's message was clear. True nobility comes from character and achievement, not from DNA sequences. We spent 50,000 years believing we were superior because of our bloodlines. Meanwhile, our exiled cousins built themselves into something remarkable without any of our advantages. She gestured to Sarah. This human opened a tomb that none of us could. Not because her blood was purer, but because she represents what the Emperor valued. Curiosity. Perseverance. The courage to stand in a strange place and pursue knowledge despite being surrounded by those who thought her lesser. Ambassador Williams stepped forward. Earth accepts this alliance with gratitude and respect. We propose joint research teams to study the tomb's technology. Joint expeditions to explore the colony worlds marked in the star charts. A true partnership between our peoples. Over the following weeks, the alliance took shape. Sarah became Earth's official liaison to Valerix Prime, spending her days helping translate ancient texts and teaching Korvathian scientists about human archaeology methods. The irony was not lost on her. She had come to learn from them, and now they were learning from her. One evening, Sarah and the Empress stood together on a palace balcony, looking up at the stars. The tomb star charts had revealed dozens of worlds that the ancient exiles had been meant to colonize. "Which one should we visit first?" the Empress asked. "I don't know," Sarah admitted. "But I think we should decide together." The Empress smiled. 50,000 years ago, my ancestor sent your ancestors away in anger and fear. Today we go forward as family. Sarah thought about the long journey that had brought humanity here. From a primitive colony to a spacefaring civilization. From exiles to explorers. And finally, after all that time, back home. She pulled out a tissue and sneezed into it. The Empress laughed, a sound of genuine warmth. "Come," the Empress said. "We have a universe to explore. And this time we do it together." Behind them, the ancient tomb stood silent, its purpose finally fulfilled. A message across 50,000 years had found its recipients. The children of the rebellion had come home at last. And the galaxy would never be the same.